see. Oh, only 2 people are waiting. That's interesting. Make sure we have the right. Mm-hmm. There we go. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Susan, Erin.
Hi.
Good morning.
So
Morning.
we're just going to finish getting this set up. We'll be with you momentarily. It's going to be helpful at the beginning part if everyone mutes themselves. And then when we get more into the give and take talk, then you unmute yourselves one at a time. Because otherwise, if dogs bark, phones ring, things like that could be disruptive in the background. I did, yes. And you might want to open your chat box, and I'm assuming everyone can hear us fine.
I know.
At the moment, you probably wanted to.
I think I saw him walking in his door. He didn't look well. Looks like he lost weight. I was thinking about that the other day. I was walking by.
Could you mute whoever that is, please?
I think I saw him. I think like kind of, you know how you catch a glimpse of someone. I know. We can do his grass, huh? I can help him. Maybe I can help do the front of his yard.
If someone
All right,
has not muted, you're talking about your neighbor's yard or something?
Yeah, so please stop that. I actually muted all of you now. You're allowed to unmute yourself when the time is right, but that time isn't now yet. Thank you very much. And I'm just opening the chat box. You probably want to open that as well. Oh, thank you. Yes, so mute yourselves. And hi, everyone. Welcome to Sue and Erin Singleton's Anti-Racism Roundtable. Really glad to have you all here. We have a good-sized group. And I'm Sue Singleton, obviously.
And Erin Singleton.
And today we really felt we needed to be sharing some things because, in fact, in a couple of weeks is our 24th wedding anniversary. And a lot of people that we know have been surprised to hear about some of the things that we've experienced as an interracial couple. And of course, the many things that Erin has experienced as a Black man. So just want to, some more people are trying to get in. All right. And so the many things that we've experienced, people expressed surprise, especially since the George Floyd murder. And we were just talking in general. And it sounds like I've got to mute everyone again because someone's sneaking in on the unmute. Yeah, we have stragglers coming in, so I have to keep admitting them. Okay, so first, everyone should be muted now. And welcome, I'm Sue Singleton.
Erin Singleton again.
Yep, so
Still here.
yeah, we're still here. And what we'd like to do is start by having everyone remember that this is a mutually respectful conversation. So we ask no profanities, no political discussions either. This is all about talking open-heartedly about some situations that are very real in our United States of America today. And so thank you all for being here. Just to let you know how it'll be organized, we'll start out that Erin's going to share some of his story about this topic, and then I'll share from my perspective. Then we have a couple of facts that we would like to share with you. And then we have some discussion points on another piece of paper if people run out of things. But after that first part where we're kind of sharing some things, which will probably take about 15 minutes or so, then we'd like to invite some of you to speak up, because some of you may have experienced some of the same things that we have. Some of you may just be asking questions to kind of illuminate yourself. So really look forward to that opportunity. So during that time, you'll unmute yourself to speak, and then you'll remute yourself so that, again, we don't get the background noise we were getting earlier. And I think that's all we need to remember to say. I haven't yet loaded it, but I will. I'm learning how to load things. There's a beautiful resource document, several pages long, of educating yourself about racism and anti-racism, including books, movies, documentaries, podcasts, all kinds of wonderful resources for after today. And it's so long that we're just going to load it so that you can save it. So at some point along the way, I'll upload that. That's why I was late. I thought I sent it to myself to this computer, and I hadn't. So anyway, Aaron would like to begin with some of the things he's experienced.
Okay, so first off, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Mississippi in the 50s, early 60s. So segregation, goes without saying. That's what it was. So certain stores you couldn't go in, the segregated water fountains, bathrooms, movie theaters, things of that nature. Okay, so racism at that time was, it was right there in your face. What we experience now is more subtle, but it's still there. So at about third grade, I went from Mississippi to Fort Wayne, Indiana. So in Fort Wayne, the school I was in, there was only 5 blacks in the whole school, and we were all cousins. Okay, so again, some of the racism there from the other kids, it was subtle, and some of it was kind of like just in your face. Now, the interesting thing is that just due to circumstances of me growing up, I had to go back to Mississippi when I was in 5th grade. Now, when I was in Indiana, I had my Southern drawl. I talked about over yonder and over there, and I didn't have complete sentences because that's what you got in the school in Mississippi in the 60s. So my voice changed. I didn't talk like I was black. I went back to Mississippi. So then I experienced racism there because I didn't talk black. So here I was in an all-black school, but I didn't sound like anyone else in the school. The other boys all talked like they were from the South. I now sounded like I was from the North. So I didn't fit in there. 6th grade, I was back in Indiana again. Now 6th grade on through, rest of my time in school, high school and everything, I was in Indiana. And again, I was in a predominantly white school. I think there was about 50 of us in the whole high school, 50 blacks, a few Mexican. And again, the racism was up front in your face with some people and very subtle with others, as far as the looks and expressions and just the expectations of, well, you're black, you should act this way, you should talk this way, and you're different. Okay, so other things that happened, I got to spend a nice weekend in jail in Charleston, South Carolina, actually Goose Creek, right outside of Charleston. So a friend of mine got pulled over, and I pulled over just to see about taking the kids home. And one of the police officers decided that he would teach me a lesson about interfering or trying to help, whatever the lesson was. You cannot get out of jail if you are given a public drunk charge. Now, I had not been drinking. However, I had had a beer 5 or 6 hours earlier. The officer asked me, had I had a beer? And I said, yeah, I had one about 5 hours ago. On went the cuffs, and that was Saturday morning at about 2 o'clock. You can't see the judge on Saturday or Sunday, so I was in jail until Monday. But to teach me a lesson. Okay. Now, I called around and I found a lawyer's office. The lawyer was so upset because he knew that this police department was, was bad. So he gave me one of his junior lawyers free of charge to help coach me and do what I needed to do when I went to court that morning. But again, the South, it's still the same. So I was in the South until I moved north in 94, 95. Moved from Charleston to Virginia Beach. So some of the other things that have happened, I was buying some car parts, and I was on the phone with a guy. I was going to his house. When I got to his house, he looked at me kind of startled and says, "That was you on the phone? You don't look like you sound." He wasn't expecting someone black. He was expecting someone white because I didn't sound black on the phone. Now, in Massachusetts, since Sue and I have been married, I've been profiled as far as driving the car and followed by police, of course, the check-in plates and things like that, and at least a couple occasions. So these are things that go on in everyday life, and that you may not have had any of those experiences. However, if you talk to people of color, and that's black or Mexican, South American, many of us have. So it's really about our experience, and your experience can be totally different.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to say?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I guess mine started when I announced to my family that I was marrying Aaron. So that was in '96, and my parents disowned me. And it was very hurtful, and I thought it was forever. It turns out they disowned me for about a month. And about a month later, they told me that no matter what, they didn't want to lose their daughter. So once they met Aaron, within an hour, they accepted him. And obviously, I know a part of that is because Aaron is such a warm, loving, wonderful person. His energy presence helps people feel comfortable. But I also know the fact that he's not that dark. His lips aren't that big. His nose isn't that wide. He doesn't talk black. Certainly fed into my family's accepting him more quickly. And one of my elderly aunts said, "Oh, Sue, why did you have to go marrying a colored fella? Couldn't you just find a nice white boy?" And I said, "Because this is the man I love, and God has a plan for us, and I have faith in that." And so she grew to love Aaron as well. And one of my friends used the N-word. And I've forgiven her, but I'll never forget that she did. And she's grown to accept Aaron too. Now, interesting enough, on my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, which they made it all the way to 68 years, in a smaller gathering, apart from the big party, my father actually stated to a decent sized group of people, "Aaron is the best thing that's ever happened to this family." So we did come a long way, and ultimately Aaron and I cared for my parents here in our home in Massachusetts for 14 years, the final 14 of their 15 years here. The final year they were in a nursing home here. And another thing that happened, I was a highly rated and award-winning banking executive for a major multinational bank. After I married Aaron, I was denied all executive privileges, including entertainment tickets to entertain clients and prospects, which was a normal part of how I would do business and meet my goals. I was no longer allowed access to those tickets. The support staff was told to no longer answer my telephone. And back at that point in time, we didn't have cell phones. I didn't have one personally, and the bank didn't provide one. So if I wasn't sitting at my desk, then my clients wouldn't be able to reach me. My sales and loan goals were raised to much higher than any of my colleagues, significantly higher. to try to set me up for failure. Finally, I was told that Aaron was not permitted to come into the bank anymore. He used to come in on occasion and take me out to lunch during my lunch break, and he would just come into our department and pick me up. And I said, why can't he come into the bank? Well, he just doesn't fit in with the rest of us. Needless to say, I didn't stay there much longer after that. And I have to say my final banking experience was totally different than that. Everyone loved and accepted him, but this particular one, it was absolutely egregious. Then Aaron and I were down in Mississippi for his aunt's funeral, and he and a friend of ours and I were sent to the liquor store to buy some bottles of wine for the people at the house. So I stayed in the car. So the two front seats were vacant because Aaron and the other friend went inside. So I stayed in the car, and as it played out, I'm not sure whether that was a good idea or a bad idea that I stayed in the car, because a couple of things happened. I was approached by a very drunk black man who started peering at me and yelling not very nice things to me. As Aaron and the friend came out, they both were kind of ashen. They were very upset. They were treated extremely rudely by the two white people in the liquor store. And the treatment was just short of using the N-word out loud. It was absolutely horrible. So as they came out, Aaron actually realized he knew this drunk black guy from a long time ago. And he saw that he was kind of looking at the car, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "What? Oh," and he recognized Aaron, said hi. And then Aaron said, "Oh, you're looking at my wife. That's Sue. Say hi to Sue." And he said, "What? Where'd you get that thing?" Instead of saying, "Hi, Sue, nice to meet you." So I don't know if things would have been better if I'd gone inside or not. So that was racism going both ways in a single incident. On vacation, we were with a group of people, including a couple from England, and the woman said, "Singleton, what a beautiful British name. So tell me, Aaron, tell me about your wonderful British heritage." Now, I wish I had said this. I didn't have the courage at the time. I didn't say anything. Aaron just said, "Well, I don't really know," keeping it simple. But the answer that was the true answer was that was the last name of the slave owners. So here in 2019, 2020, we're still offered separate checkouts at the grocery store when we're emptying things out of the same cart and standing right next to each other. We're still offered separate checks in restaurants. And in some stores, we're watched very, very carefully by either the employees or the owners. And this has happened to us in various parts of the United States, in particular and specifically Scottsdale, Arizona, and several towns and cities in Colorado. So that's kind of what we wanted you to hear, a little bit of our personal piece on that. We have some other information to share. Do you want to pick up on some of that, honey? From this part? Or would you like me to?
Go ahead.
So some questions to kind of ask yourself. Do you express racist ideas about people of color? Or if you're a person of color, do you express racist ideas about whites? When you ask someone where they're from and you get an answer, you know, "Well, you don't talk or sound like you're from the South, the Midwest, New England, Texas. Gee, you don't talk black." And I'm sure Aaron's heard that quote, "Oh, gee, you don't talk black." And do you stereotype immigrants from Asia, Africa, Mexico, Jamaica, Haiti, India, etc.? These are questions to ask yourself. And do you believe that the majority of people on welfare are black? Well, here's a good statistic for you. 43% of the people on welfare are white. 28% are Hispanic, and 23% are black. So 20% more whites are on welfare than blacks. Within both white and black cultures, there's discussions about people's hair texture, color, style, light skin versus dark skin. So even within the black community, you can either be too white or too black, or not black enough or not white enough, and so you don't fit in anywhere. And Aaron just shared that he has experienced that, and we have a number of friends who have shared that. So really, before we can stand up to racism and become anti-racist, we need to admit that it does exist. It looks like someone else to let in. Hold on a second. And so I've got a few different ways to define racism that I'll share with you. One way of defining it is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or is marginalized. That's a very good definition. Here's another one: the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Another very good one. A third one is a racist is someone who supports a racist policy through his or her actions or inactions, or expresses racist ideas. So if you do oppress or speak down to or about people of color, then you are a racist. If you have racist thoughts or opinions that you don't express, you may also be racist there. And that's where it would be kind of a really good idea to think about, where does that come from? And there's different phases of this that, depending on how many other people would like to share and talk, where there's different phases. In the fear-based mode or the anger-based mode is definitely racist. Then you have an in-between mode where you could say you're starting to learn and grow, and then you're in a true growth phase when you decide to be anti-racist. So another thing, and I think Aaron will have something to add to this, but the chronic underfunding of black schools in Mississippi was just outlined in the American Bar Association's journal in May of 2017. And we don't have the actual figure, but just saying way underfunded. And so Aaron has a few comments about that.
Well, when it comes to racism, one of the things that comes up all the time is talking about the poor, uneducated black people or Mexican people or whatever the races that we're spotlighting. Now, if you underfund the schools, you are creating this yourself, whether we're talking to government, state government, federal government, whatever. So by underfunding, you keep the poor, uneducated blacks poor and uneducated. Now, if you fund the schools and you give everyone a good education, this is really what brings our country to the height of what it can potentially be, because now you have everyone has the ability to go out and get a good job and support their family and to get off of welfare. So I came up with that concept myself just from reading some of the materials and some of the books and hearing some things on TV. It's like you're going to sit and complain, but yet you continue to perpetuate the problem by not doing the funding that's necessary to help people get out of poverty.
And where would Aaron be if he had stayed in Mississippi? Thank God his family moved him to Indiana. And an interesting thing is that right now, the world population, only 11.5% of the whole world's population is white, whereas in the United States at the moment, 60% of the population is white. But the projections are that over 60% of the US population is going to be non-white within the next 30 years or so. So think about that. If people aren't treated more equally and given educations, you've got 60% or more who may be disadvantaged. And that's not a good thing. So now might be a really good time to become anti-racist. And then finally, just a couple more points before we open up the conversation from all of you. So white women with degrees earn far less than white men. And then Latina or Black women with degrees earn even less than white women. And that's in Gender Gap, Wage Gap 2017 studies. And then finally, two last points. Between 1986 and 2016, 1,466 Blacks were handcuffed by police in Oakland, California in non-arrest, non-violent traffic stops compared to 72 whites. That's 95.3% Blacks were handcuffed for a basic traffic stop. In Greater Boston today in 2020, if you're a Black man driving an expensive, nice vehicle, expect to be stopped and expect to be asked, where'd you get this car? Whose car is this? Okay, that was quite a mouthful there. And so just to remind you, please keep yourselves muted if you're not speaking. We're going to limit each person to 3 minutes because I don't think everyone wants to talk necessarily. But for those of you that would like to talk, we just want to allow time for other people. And you could either talk by asking questions, or you could talk by sharing some of your experiences that you've had.
I'd be happy to start.
Thank you, Trish.
Yeah. I have a confession.
Yes.
When you had your first session like this, I said, well, I'm not racist, you know? And I watch TED Talks all the time, and I kept avoiding the ones on race. I said, I'm not racist. And I was watching some this week in preparation for this call here, because I'm like, I really, something kept nudging me to look a little bit more closely. And I just was listening to one, the difference being not racist versus not anti-racist. And I realized it wasn't what I was saying, it's what I wasn't doing.
Wow.
And
great.
It made me think that it isn't just about color. It is really about all the inequities and the health and wealth gaps everywhere. And I'm curious as to how it is that we didn't protest and go to the streets when people of lower economic status were dying from COVID in much higher numbers. Those were many, many, many deaths. And yet we didn't go to the street. We didn't create any policies for more funding or better health care for these people, or a better opportunity for them to get the same care that they would have gotten in Atlanta as maybe in a, small rural Georgia community. So I would love to read this gentleman's book. It's Ibram Kundi or whatever, and he was being interviewed, and it was just perfect because it was drawing our attention to the fact that even within Black groups, there's a lot of sort of racial discrimination within the Black groups, just like within white groups.
Yeah.
I mean, we struggle as much with people of low economic status in white groups. We're afraid of them sometimes.
Yes.
You know?
Trish, thank you so much. We need to let other people have time to speak up. Thank you so much. That was very courageous of you to fess up like that too.
Thanks.
And someone else wrote in, I'm trying to learn and raise issues in conversation with people I come in contact with. What can I do to help? I appreciate your information is mind-boggling. I need to take a moment at some point during here to go ahead and upload for you this very wonderful resource. So it's specifically resources for non-whites, even though some excuse me, for whites as opposed to non-whites, but some non-whites would find it helpful too. Aaron and I meant to bring them into this room. The two books that we have found to be really helpful right now are How to Be Anti-Racist, and So You Want to Talk About Race. The authors are listed on that. I think it's 4 pages long that I'll be uploading, but we found them particularly helpful. And even Aaron, even as a Black man, he found those 2 books very helpful. And so next person that would like to, oh, there's some more people sharing more feedback.
I'd like to, if I can.
Oh, attachments, so someone has to leave, so let me try to load that right now. Someone else can start to talk as I'm doing that.
I like to say a few things if I can.
Yes.
Sure.
One, I can identify with Aaron's thing about talking Black and not, or not talking Black in my case, as in Aaron's case. I used to own a business in New England, and I would get my clients by talking on the phone. They would not meet me before I started doing work for them. So at one point we would eventually meet. There's several experiences, but I have some abstract points to make here as well. So at one point we'd actually meet on the phone, and in order to prepare them, because I live in New England, which can have very racist elements at times, I would prepare them for the meeting to understand that I was a Black person by describing myself in very grotesque ways. I said, before you meet me, I have to describe myself so that you do not get an impression, you're not shocked. I am 6'6". I am not, I'm very short. I have a long ZZ Top beard. I have a peg leg, and I have this big mole on the top of my forehead. And I describe myself in very ugly ways. And they would say, okay, well, this is all about the intellectual property, not about how you look. And then when I would actually meet them, they would be so relieved that I wasn't as I had described myself. and so, and that they could actually do business with a person who looks like me, as opposed to the person that I had described on the phone. So, and I too, have been stopped by cops. I drive a fairly expensive car. I had a discussion with a group of neighbors one time. They get stopped maybe about 4 times a year. I get stopped at one point 16 times a month, but typically about 4 times a month, driving around in my Mercedes. So, so I identify with those experiences as well. But now onto some rather than personal experiences, because we've all had personal experiences, whether Black or white, we've all had personal experiences here. But there's a higher perspective to look at. There's this racism thing it starts off as curiosity. Your hair is different than mine. What about that? We start to understand differences differently than how we should. Differences are fine. Differences are what makes the world go round. Differences are who we are. But once society gets hold of differences and governments finds a way to classify its citizens, that's when racism or systemic racism starts to take hold. And so, the assumption I make when I look at white people is that they simply don't understand. It's not that they're criminal, it's not that they're wrong, it's just that they simply do not understand the experience of a Black person in their culture.
That's it.
Thank you. Yes, I agree, because there's a lot of richness in recognizing the differences, but not to have that be the focus. So it's not good to be totally colorblind and pretend you don't have something to maybe learn or grow from. And just a really silly example from when I went to grad school, it was the Chevy Nova, that they decided to expand the Chevy Nova being sold all over the Spanish-speaking countries. And they didn't stop to think that Nova in Spanish means it doesn't run, it doesn't work. So it was a total bomb. Now, if there had been sort of a diverse marketing department, then they would never have done such a foolish thing. So it failed miserably. So anyway.
My last comment there, just the last statement. I find that racism is rooted in our fear of differences. And so as we feel the differences between you and me, and what's better, what's worse, et cetera, racism gets born out of that kind of fear. So in my own personal life, I've sort of embraced differences and suggest to myself that differences take on a different role in order to combat racism. So
Yes.
Right.
Next.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Is there a queue? Is there a line to speak?
Not right now, no. So
Okay.
is that you, Kiera? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to add, because I think that racism is something that's different than the bigger picture. To me, the bigger picture is anti-Blackness, and that is systemic, and that is really deeply woven into the country. And I don't think that we're going to solve what we're calling the racism problem until we really look at what anti-Blackness means. Anti-Blackness came about so that we could have the systems in place that we could have that benefited selective people. And the reason why I'm emphasizing anti-Blackness is because we all collude with it. Everyone participates in it, whether you're being victimized by it or not. Most of us, because we still have intense segregation in our country, have grown up. I mean, I know that I'm overgeneralizing because it's not true for every single person, but the vast majority of us have grown up around people like that because of the segregation in this country, which was set up by our government with redlining and the way that mortgages were given out, etc. So what does that mean? That means that me, as a woman of African heritage, I'm an American of African heritage, I learned anti-Blackness from people who looked like me. Now, it took the form of colorism, it took the form of respectability politics, like how closely you can assimilate or in some way approximate whiteness gave you more value than someone who was further away from it. That is really anti-Blackness. And I don't think it's not the individual. When we talk about racism, we're talking about what individual people can do. But when we talk about anti-Blackness, we're talking about something bigger. We're talking about the fact that this is not a United States problem. This is a worldwide problem of anti-Blackness because of the history of the world, the way that it evolved. And we can undo it if we really make anti-Blackness the focus. For example, many of you are probably familiar with Malcolm Gladwell because he's a famous author and he's written many books. One of his first books, Blink, where he talked about how people have these decisions that they make in the blink of an eye, he spent some time talking about anti-Blackness and how he himself, as a person who of mixed race, when he would do these anti-bias tests, like the one that Harvard created, where you just respond very quickly on a computer, he himself, he was very upset by the fact that he assigned negative emotions or negative behaviors, I should say, to Black people. So I know that I'm being a little strident in my tone, but I feel very strongly like don't miss the boat, because this is a really incredible time in history because we're all looking at this. So I'm really afraid that we'll miss it. If we have a really powerful chance to undo anti-Blackness, to make sure that we don't continue with this virulent hatred of darkness, of Blackness, that we really see that all things, as the person, I think his name is Lee, was speaking about, like if we can undo anti-Blackness, I believe we can get to the point where we see that we are so lucky. I don't think there's any other species besides humans that has the infinite diversity, size, shape, hair texture. Like, we're just incredible with diversity. And what we do know is that nature wants diversity. Of species that don't have enough diversity don't survive. So this diversity in all the ways that we as a species are diverse is actually our tremendous strength and beauty.
Yes.
And I don't think we'll be able to see it unless we really name what is in the room. And I'm talking about all peoples, right? Because you have people in India that are bleaching their skin. So this is not just a United States problem, a white problem, a black problem. Everybody on the planet participates in anti-blackness. And I know I'm going on and on.
Yeah, you went about 6 minutes. So
Sorry.
I'm gonna let people hear the beeper. Aaron turned it off right away. We're gonna let you hear the beeper so you realize.
Thank you. So and I do apologize.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful points. Very wonderful points. Next.
Hi. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
It's Susan Carey. Thank you so much for everything, and thank you for everyone who's spoken. I think, I mean, aside from every aspect of life needing to be changed, which is a big undertaking, but it needs to be done, I think people are having a hard time understanding what Black Lives Matter means. So if you could speak to that.
Okay. Actually,
I try to
raise his hand like he wants to answer that, and now I'll pipe in too. And just let's all remember to keep it brief so that everyone can talk. Lee, did you want to answer that because your hand was up?
Yeah, Susan asked about Black Lives Matter, and I've been thinking about that one a lot. Of course, most people here in this conference understand that Black Lives Matter, that particular phrase and movement, is about police brutality. But it has gotten such a bad rep because of the response that establishment has taken to the phrase Black Lives Matter, responding with All Lives Matter, responding with Blue Lives Matter, and things of that sort. So I've come to the conclusion, just as Kiara, I believe her name is, said that this is really an anti-Black movement. I believe Black Lives Matter is been misnamed, and that it would have received a much better response if it was called, don't laugh at this, a don't beat me up movement instead of a Black Lives Matter movement. Because when you say Black Lives Matter, you're disguising what the problem is and why it came about. It came about because of police brutality. The football players took a knee because of police brutality. So if we call Black Lives Matter a don't beat me up movement rather than a Black Lives Matter movement, it becomes clearer what's really at stake here, police brutality. And but the phrase Black Lives Matter has now taken on a different personality because people respond to it in a wide variety of ways that they can because it's called Black Lives Matter. However, calling it a don't beat me up movement makes it a bit clearer what it is. So to anyone who's confused about Black Lives Matter and its role in racism or addressing racism, I would suggest they change the phrase to a don't beat me up movement. And that explains that more.
I can appreciate that. Thank you, Lee. That's a good thought because the Black lives do matter, but so do Asian lives, so do Hispanic lives, so do everyone, but most whites haven't experienced that. When I talked about, just a simple traffic stop and 95-point-something% of the blacks, of the people handcuffed were Black. And so the reason that movement started versus what it is now has morphed. And unfortunately, a lot of people that have shown up at the protests were actually troublemakers that really had nothing to do with that official movement too. So I think there's value in the Black Lives Matter movement. There is also a phony Black Lives Matter website and funding page. So you have to be careful if you decide to get involved in that, because there's another one taking money and it's not the actual Black Lives Matter. So I think there's value in all of it, but I like what Lee said, that really it's about police brutality to anyone. Absolutely. And it happens that people of color are more targeted and recipients of that. And so I think that's why they started naming it in that way. So I hope that answered it. There was a question in the chat thing too about the documents. So I already loaded that document in the chat box, and I don't know exactly where it shows up. I loaded it at the bottom. So you should be able to save that to your own computer. If any of you have problems with it, then Veronica can always email it to you on Monday when she gets back to work. So you could just email her at info@thewaytobalance.com or give a call to our office, which is pretty much everywhere. It's on Facebook, it's everywhere. But you should be able to download it from the chat box today.
So
Can I speak for a moment?
Yes.
So my name is Carrie. This is Darren. We actually live in Minnesota, and I'm an educator. Darren's a police officer. So right there in the middle of George Floyd and all sorts of things. So Darren was down at right there, having to be down there. So we have a interesting, unique situation ourselves, I would say. Speaking of Black Lives Matter, police brutality, all sorts of things. One of the things that I think is important, especially when the question about Black Lives Matter, I'm not sure, and Lee, I actually really enjoy listening to you and hearing your thoughts. I'm not sure I completely agree with the don't beat me up piece, because I think it gets away from the focus. And of course, police brutality does include everybody. I mean, lots of people besides African Americans, although it's clearly very a larger percentage. African Americans, a super systemic problem. But I wonder, when I hear the more, and again, I'm an educator, so I'm constantly reading, looking, just trying to find as much. And I find that the more that everybody does it, and I do specifically speak to white people, because what I have found is a lot of white people, my friends, have come to me and said, hey, can you give me some resources? Like, I'd really, like to get more into this. And it just sends me over the edge, because anybody can go to Google and anybody can, do your own research. Your Black friends don't need to be the ones that are, teaching you. In fact, we're exhausted.
Very good point. Yeah.
But I mean, just being is exhausting, honestly. But so one of the things that I found an easy way, the more you know, when someone, says something about Black Lives Matter or anything, I think one of the easiest things to do, because I think practicing is almost kind of important, because it's those times that happen and you kind of go, those times you're stuck and you don't really know what to say, right? So I feel like kind of going through it in your mind, like, what would I say if this happened to me? A really easy way, I think, to disarm someone is just to say, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that? And it forces people to go, actually, they don't expect you to say that. They kind of expect you to either agree or maybe not even say anything. And so as soon as you ask someone to explain why they think a certain way, it can change the tone of things, because now they're forced to actually think. And that can open up a little bit of dialogue, because then they're forced to think a little bit, and then sometimes they kind of fumble, because they're going along with whatever they've heard, on news or just their friends or whatever, and that is, it doesn't always work, but it can be a good place to start. And for me, that's kind of a practice of an educator. I mean, that's what, we give our students a lot of grace, right? Because they should be able to say, and ask questions. And then I'll say, oh, okay, well, let's unpack that a little bit. And there are ways to do that with adults as well. Right. It's just sometimes it comes at times when you're not like really expecting it.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point, Carrie. Thank you. That's a great way to sort of get behind why someone would say something. So wonderful. And boy, you guys are in a very unique and challenging situation at the front lines there. So thank you for speaking up. And I'm sure there's probably someone else that's ready to say something or to ask a question.
Hi there, folks. Max in Newburyport, Massachusetts, with Kathleen. Thanks for this conversation. I really appreciate your doing this. Kath told me about it, and I immediately said yes. My first wife, Leah, was Afro-Canadian. If I had said African-American, she would have been all over me about it. But speaking to the point of not sounding black enough, being from Nova Scotia, not even close, and she had to deal with that quite often because people's expectations were what they were. The question I have for the whole group really is the idea of prejudice versus racism. I never had the opportunity to have this conversation with Leah. She passed away 20 years ago. But the idea that prejudice is something that we all carry, and you've got to deal with it, you've got to confront it and come to terms with it in some fashion. But I wonder, do people think that racism is a manifestation? You said it's directed against, when you're talking about your definitions, prejudice is directed against somebody. That's an action. And that's when it crosses the line into racism. But I think that, and it's one of the things I learned and still learn every day, it's so subtle. You don't even think about it. I remember talking with one of Leah's cousins and about this and saying that, I didn't even stop to think. You think, oh, you're racist, because you are prejudiced, because you are burning a cross on somebody's lawn or something, that egregious. But it's more subtle than that. It's like seeing a person of color coming down the road and, oh, where's my wallet? And so subtle and so subconscious, you don't realize it, and coming to terms with knowing that emotion when you see it. So I'd like to hear from others about their feelings towards prejudice versus racism and how they're interrelated. Thank you.
Myself, I think that prejudice is the conscious and unconscious belief systems, and it may not be acted out. And so that's still somewhere on the spectrum of racism. Racism is more an action, just like anti-racism is more of an action. But for me, in my opinion, prejudice is a subtler version of racism.
Okay, to give an example, my first girlfriend in high school was white, and her family would not let her date blacks. But my Mexican friend could go to the house and pick her up. So for all purposes, they thought that she was dating a Mexican. That was okay. But due to their prejudice, she couldn't date me because I was black. So they actually never met me. So we look at, like I said, I grew up in the South. So I grew up right there in the 50s, in the 60s, with all the segregation that there was. So, pretty much anywhere we went, the prejudice was obvious, and as you're saying now, it is there, but it's more subtle. I would say if you go down to parts of Mississippi and Alabama and places right now, it's not so subtle. It has not changed much in many of those smaller towns. So now in the North, I think it's more of, as you're saying, it's the first thoughts that come to a person's mind about when they see or have an experience with someone of color, the prejudice that come from their past that was part of what they grew up with as a family, or the school that they went to. And it's not like the first thing that's there, but it is there. So there's always a thought of, oh, that person's black, that person's Mexican, or whatever. And with blacks, it might be about the white people. So the prejudice is there. And we can even say that prejudice is sometimes in the genetics of the family line. So when we look at that, because we do energy healing, we sometimes will look at what is in a person's genes, and it does show up.
And it does influence the genetics. It actually does. And so that's what's so unique, I guess, in terms of when you look at it on very many different levels. Anyone else have a comment to share?
If I may, I find this, the distinction between prejudice and racism to be extremely interesting. And I like to offer what occurred to me as a definition between those two to make a distinction between them, because I believe that's an important distinction. We all carry some prejudices inside if we're honest with ourselves. As an athlete, I've seen people who have prejudices against athletes, as fat people, skinny people. We all carry some sort of prejudice inside, but it turns into racism when we take these differences. The first seed of this is when we take these differences and make something superior or inferior with them. And then it gets further steeped into racism when we start creating governmental systems or social systems around these differences. So prejudices can start out as what at the root of racism and systemic racism, but it turns into racism when we start to use these differences to make ourselves better or worse than others. And so for me, it's still about how we handle our differences. Just one is more an extreme than the other. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I would piggyback on that, and I would say a simple way that I learned and what I teach is that it's when you start to act on your prejudices is when you've now moved into racism. So if your prejudices cause you to act differently, or cause you to put someone else have them act differently, you are now moving into racism, which, and I think that people struggle with the word racist, and it's a very scary term. No one wants to be racist, although I would offer that it's like the air we breathe. You can't not be racist. But it's very scary for people. And a lot of people, I think, see racism as like the, KKK, right? Or neo-Nazis or something like that. Really, those types of acts and those types of beliefs and people. But I think a good way is like just in your own self, like if you are taking your prejudice and you are making yourself do something different because of that, that puts people, as Lee said, in a different position, right? That is a racist act. So even something as simple as, I'm going to cross the street because I see these, these young, African-American kids with hoodies on, right? Or I'm going to lock my doors when I'm driving because I'm in a bad neighborhood, or, things like that. Those are things that are acting on your prejudices. And those are, and very well be unconscious, right? And using your implicit biases. But that's where I look at piggybacking on what Lee said, like you're taking some action. In institutional, bigger pieces, I look at prejudice plus power equals racism. So if you have the power to, in a much bigger scheme, to create inequalities because of race, now that's you've got this racist institution, and those types of things are really hard to see. But I've always for me, prejudice plus power, or prejudice plus action.
Okay, thank you. I just looked at the clock. Aaron and I have our chakra healing meditation starting in just 15 minutes. So we do need to wrap up here. So that document is loaded in the chat box. And the chat box, if you go to the bottom of your screen, it's there. I will need to close this out because our next event is also on Zoom. But thank you all so much for your sharing, for your questions, for your insights, and hope to stay in touch with many of you to work more on this topic. And Aaron has some parting words as well.
So really what I wanted to say is that, when we do nothing, we actually allow it to continue as it is. So just the fact that all of you are here today and sharing in these thoughts, you take the next step. You find the documentaries, you find the books to read, you find what you can do to change yourself, even though it is a hard topic to address, because just as Trish said in the beginning, she didn't watch these things because she didn't figure she had an issue at all. But we all need to learn. We need to, so me as a Black person, I need to watch these documentaries. I need to read these books, because there's things that I don't know, and I want to do a better job of preventing racism, continuing it as is, just by, I can just pull myself out of the picture and say it doesn't affect me, because I have a good job, I have a good life. But if I do that and don't consider the people who have less than me, okay, and then I am being a racist. So I think we all need to take a really hard look at that within ourselves and see what we can do to initiate change.
Yes. And just to answer someone's question in there, why don't the people in the South that are in these difficult circumstances move? When you're in poverty, you don't have anywhere to move. You need some capacity to be able to move. So Aaron is very, very fortunate that some other family members helped him to get to Indiana from Mississippi, because if he had stayed there, he would have been stuck there,
Yeah.
most likely, and he wouldn't have become educated. And so I noticed that a number of you are asking a few questions about us continuing the conversation. If we get enough requests for that, I'm willing, and I think Aaron is too. And was an hour long enough? You can give us feedback later, because we do need to set up. Aaron's Tibetan bowls for chakra clearing and balancing is very relaxing. That's also free of charge, and it goes on for the next hour. So we have under 10 minutes to get set up for that in the other room. So I will be signing off now, but Veronica did put the link for that in the chat box. And this video from Zoom will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is The Way to Balance LLC, all squished together like it was one word. And I expect that probably Veronica will try to get it on there on Monday, probably when she gets back to the office. And so thank you all so much. And my understanding is the chat box gets saved in that video too. So I think that does allow you to connect with some people if you want to. But if there's enough interest in Aaron and Sue and The Way to Balance doing this, let us know, because we think this is a very helpful and provocative conversation.
Yep, it's got to start somewhere.
Yes. I hope you all have a great day, and looking forward to connecting another time or in 15 minutes. So again, Veronica put that link, and take care, everyone.
I want to say thank you. And Veronica, can you make someone co-host? I mean, I don't know, Lee or even Carrie. And then so we can continue this conversation for those who want to continue, because you can leave and do your other thing, and this conversation can continue.
I'd love to have this conversation continue.
We can't run 2 Zoom meetings.
No, you can. You can just give it to a different co-host. You don't do it. You give it to like a person that isn't part of your thing, and they can continue the conversation.
Okay, it would allow us to start our next Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Veronica, you may not want to be staying. Oh, you can do it, Veronica? Okay. So how do I make her co-host and me step out? I have no idea how to do
no,
that.
she doesn't do it because she's going to do your next one. So she would choose somebody who's willing to stay. I think, Lee, are you willing to take that?
Yeah, I could stay for a little while, but I don't have a Zoom account though.
Oh, you don't have a Zoom? Oh, okay. Okay, then you can make co-host.
Veronica has just said she'll stay today for a little bit. I just don't know how to make her co-host. So let me see. If I click on her.
My Zoom account is not a paid one. Sue has a paid Zoom account, so she can do this more easily than I can. I have the free version of Zoom, so.
Okay.
But I'd love to continue
if
here.
I can figure out how to do that to make Veronica.
She said she can make somebody else co-host. Veronica, go ahead and make me co-host. Nadine Mazard. And then
Oh, got
whoever
it.
doesn't
Okay.
want to be part of it, you guys just come off, and then we'll have our own conversation. We'll just continue the conversation.
Nadine, how does Sue make someone else co-host? I don't know.
Actually, Veronica said she knows how to do it. So
Oh,
we're
okay.
good. All right.
Okay.
So thank you so much, everyone. We're signing off for now.
I'm sticking around.
I'm sticking around too.
Yeah, so am I.
I'll stick around too.
Okay.
Hi guys, it's Veronica. I'm just working on it right now.
Thank you, Veronica. Take your time.
Yeah, let me just get logged in.
Thank you so much, Sue. I
Yeah.
really
Thank
appreciated you and Erin here. So
Thank you.
we'll
Thanks.
see you again.
Okay. Take care.
Bye, Sue.
Bye.
I would like to pose a question to Carrie. I think, Carrie, you said you were going to be able to stay on. You know, I think I'm probably not alone. You know, you shared that you are actually in Minnesota and that your partner is a police officer. And I mean, you look to me like a woman of African heritage. I don't want to try to tell people what they are. I'm just saying visually, that's how you look to me. So I'm really curious about how the two of you navigated that and what came up for you. I think it could be helpful for us if you both, felt like sharing that.
Sure. Yeah, so Darren and I went to high school together. And so we've known each other for a long time. Didn't get together till a little bit later in life, but have still known each other. We grew up in a town called Northfield, which is in a little bit southern Minnesota. I see a nod, someone might know. There are two colleges there, St. Olaf and Carleton College. It's a town about, 17,000? Does that sound right? 17,000. So like my family was I'm adopted. So I'm biracial, but I'm also adopted into a white family. Single white mom adopted me and my brother. And so my brother and I were one of the only, Black kids in not only in the town, but of course in the school and in my grade. So we've known each other for a long time. So, it has been a struggle. I mean, I think honestly, when we first got together, and I don't want to speak for Darren, but I at least felt like I tiptoed around things for a while. I mean, because we were each learning from each other about things. Like I learn a lot about what the average public doesn't know about law enforcement, like different things that actually happen because for a reason that the average public just doesn't know. And so I would like in some things I'm like, so you have to do that because of XYZ or whatever. And I'll give an example because I was like, what? Because this is something that people get up and I think get really mad about. And one of the things is, so now we've had 3 very public police shootings in national in Minnesota. And when Jamar Clark was shot and killed by police, one of the things that after being shot, the police handcuffed the suspects. And that was one thing that everyone kind of went, you've shot him, he's on the ground. Why do he's handcuffed up in arms? But that's standard procedure, which I didn't know. So that's what they do for everybody. So things like that actually are things that so we've been able to have these conversations. But I do think we tiptoed around stuff because first of all, we're also in Minnesota nice. If you grow up that way, you don't want to offend anyone. So even in our own relationship, I think I'm an educator, I'm super liberal, I'm African-American. I have lots of these conversations in school.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? I'm really sorry. I only have about 5 minutes before their next video starts. I don't have an email address. Nadine, I tried yours and it's saying it's not associated with a Zoom account, so I'm not able to make you a.
Okay. Can you use mine? I'll give you my email address.
Yes.
I'll put it in the chat.
That would be great. Yep, I'll do that real quick. Sorry, Carrie, to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I just
So
want to
think-
get this finished before they start their next one.
I just think that it took, just like the rest of the country, honestly, I think it took, and we've had lots of conversations, but nothing like what's happening now. And because we were in the thick of it, and Darren had to go down to Minneapolis and be part of the police force that was there. And so we both started being much more vocal. He wants to see, go ahead.
I just want to say, like the Jamar Clark example that she gave, though, of at the time where that's procedure to handcuff, that's the stuff that needs to change now. Because I'm 27 years in this, and I look at the stuff that we've done for the last couple of decades on what standard procedure is. But if you do have to use deadly force or something like that, maybe you don't need to handcuff the person because you have for the last 30 years. You know, it's so.
Yeah, it's not letting me. It says that you have to be associated with our Zoom account. So what I'm going to do is just create an email list. If anybody wants to be included on the email list, I'm going to send you all an email. If you don't want to be, just let me know that. So that way you guys can continue a chat or something. I'm sorry, I can't make this work. It's saying you have to be associated with our Zoom account, and maybe we have a different kind of account or something.
Oh.
Are you saying you have to end it, Veronica?
I do, yeah, unfortunately, but I'm happy to tell you what, everybody, if you want to be included on like an email group, send me an email at info@thewaytobalance. I'll put the email address in there and I can take care of that right now.
Okay. I'm sending you an email right now.
Our email address. So I'll keep an eye out. Anyone who wants to, join a little group, I would love to have more of these chats. I think it went really well, and I'll set up some kind of a newsletter that maybe we can do this more often. And I will try to figure out how to make this work better in the future.
Okay. You said info@thewaytobalance.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat box. So the email address is right there. It's on our website. It's on our Facebook, everything. I check all of those things. But unfortunately, we're going to have to end this real quick. So I will, I'll make an email group for everybody and we will go from there.
Okay. All right.
So we send you our emails, Veronica?
Send me an email at the business email, info@thewaytobalance.com, and just tell me you want to be included in the group, okay?
Okay. Okay.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
You too. Balance.
Take care, guys.
Yes.
Take care, everybody.
Yes, take care. Okay.
I know. That was good though, right? Oh yeah, you totally did. Oh, good.